Frank Smith, welcome back to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast.
Yeah, thanks. Great to be here.
It is great to have you back. I'm so excited to continue our conversation. Today, we're going to be talking about how to create a place people want to work. I can't think of many topics more important than that, uh, especially in this economy, in this labor market. Everyone's fighting for talent, and it's just a super interesting dynamic right now with the unemployment rate and COVID and people wanting to continue working remotely and companies wanting to start bringing people back, and then we have the Delta variant. Like there's just all these different pieces, that are playing a role in the current labor dynamics, and helping people want to be at work, and creating a place where people want to go and show up. I think that's as important as it's ever been.
Yeah.
Whether we're talking in person, we're talking fully remote, or some sort of a hybrid arrangement. So that's what we're going to discuss together today. As we get started, I wanted to share Frank's bio with everybody. Frank Smith started his career with a degree in accounting, and after having a few corporate jobs, realized he was designed to lead and enjoyed the lack of structure in the entrepreneurial world. When the owner of a small manufacturing company that Frank worked at passed away suddenly, Frank had the opportunity to buy the company along with the management team. Since 1994, Frank has owned and led 5 businesses, with his overlying passion being around creating a workplace people want to work at. When the dots got connected, that running a business by biblical principles was not only good for business, but even better for employees, Frank had found the secret to great business culture. Today, Frank runs Mosaic Personnel, which not only helps connect people to jobs that are more fulfilling, but also trains and coaches leaders and companies to create those cultures where people want to come to work. Frank is married to Heidi. They have 3 kids that are all out of college, and Frank enjoys car racing, golf, and traveling when he isn't working. Frank, great to have you back. Anything else you would like to share with listeners before we launch on into the conversation?
Oh, I mean, probably the thing that pops to my mind was a conversation I had just with someone earlier today, in that, I've been a business owner for 29 years. And what we've been through in the last 16 months or whatever is like nothing I've ever seen before. So, to your point earlier about kind of how important all of this is around culture and remote work and all the different things that are going on for everybody, this is probably one of the most sustained. We've been through recessions, and you might have 6 months of low business or whatever. We're in month 16, whatever it is by now, if you actually go back to count them all back to March of last year. And like you mentioned, with the variants and stuff like that, I'm not sure how much longer we still have to go. So I think all of this is bringing a lot of important topics to the top of the conversation. That's going to be interesting to see how it plays out in the marketplace.
Yeah, I think it really will. And yeah, I think we all would have loved to be done with COVID by now. And I remember having conversations late summer last year and early fall last year, thinking, yeah, we're getting close.
Yeah.
Um, and oh my goodness, with the variants and people, not wanting to get vaccinated and everything like that, it's just lingering. And so it's something we're going to continue to have to grapple with. And I think one thing we've learned throughout the pandemic is that the technologies we have to promote and facilitate, foster, a dynamic remote work environment are here to stay, and they're only getting better and better. And many people have now had a taste of what it's like to have that kind of flexibility and autonomy. And so I think, we're even last year I thought, we're never going back to the way it was before. But, a year later, I'm thinking, yeah, we really are never going back. Companies are wanting to bring people back. People don't want to go back. And due to the labor market, people have choices and they can kind of do whatever they want. And so organizations have to grapple with all of that. It's just going to be super interesting to see how it all plays out moving forward. So let's set the groundwork here, and talk about the foundational principles around creating a place people want to work. Again, whether it's face to face, whether it's virtual, whether it's
Right.
hybrid, what are some of those kind of general principles that everyone should be paying attention to, especially now?
Yeah. So where I always go to is I like to keep things simple. And so my brain can usually handle like lists of 3 or lists of 4 in my life. And so, where I've narrowed down on this is to create a place people want to come to work on Monday morning, if you're a leader, if you'll accomplish 3 things, you're going to take care of 90% of the issues that are created in the workplace. Those 3 things are setting clear expectations, listening to people, and recognizing them for the work that they do. And if I'm doing that as a leader, I'm creating what people want. What people really want in the workplace is a sense of belonging. They want a place where they are, working on something bigger than themselves, where they can see. And so if I'm setting those clear expectations in my company with our purpose statement, and here's what we're about, I can accomplish those and connect you to something that's bigger than yourself. But I want to have some autonomy in the way I do work. I want to be able to experiment and learn some things on my own. And so I have to, as a leader, provide that through listening and to recognizing you for the work that you do and giving feedback when it maybe it's either good or it's not good. But connecting and interacting with people is the basis of all of this. And when you look back in your life and you think about the people who made an impact on you, they were people that invested in you. They were people that believed in you when you didn't believe in yourself, maybe, or whatever. That might have been a parent, it might have been a coach, it might have been a friend's parent, depending on the situation. That's what people want in their boss too. And so as a leader, I can go a long way in creating a place where you want to come to work if I can just take care of those things by investing my time, listening to you, recognizing you for the work that you did, and helping connect your personal goals with the company's personal goals. I mean, leadership is all about what I call dream alignment. And if this is where the company is trying to get to, and if I can show you how you connect to that goal, and it also gets you where you want to go along the way, man, we're in this together, and we're going to bust down any walls that we come across in order to get there. So
yeah, I think those 3 elements are really vital. And certainly we all want to have a sense of why we're there, what we're trying to accomplish, how we're going to be held accountable, and how we're going to be supported, and how we go about doing our work. And that sounds super simple. And I suppose it is super simple, yet it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen so often in the vast majority of situations people find themselves in. That's why, you go to a party and want to have a fun gripe session. Just ask people what's the worst place you've ever worked, or describe your worst boss. People have stories up the wazoo. Nobody's grappling to try to figure out oh, can I think of a time I had a negative workplace environment? We have tons of examples, and it's not because people are horrible people. It's not because leaders wake up in the morning wanting to go to work and screw over their employees and exploit and take advantage of people. I think most people, most leaders, most managers, they want to do well. They want to do right by their people. They want to lead good, effective teams. They want success, and they recognize that they need to do that through their people. Yet it doesn't happen. It doesn't get moved from understanding it conceptually in the head to actually the daily practices, the daily actions and behaviors of the manager or the leader. And so I ask myself that question often, why is that the case? Why so many people listen to podcasts like this, or they go to management training, or they have an executive coach, they hear these things over and over again, yet the patterns persist, the negative patterns persist. So why do you think that is the case? Why do you think so many leaders who are well-intentioned struggle to implement some of these pretty basic, simple principles that could make a huge difference?
Yeah, so I agree with your comment earlier. It is simple, but it doesn't mean it's easy. And our selfishness takes over. The time it takes to really build a relationship with someone in your organization, the time it takes to listen to them, the effort that it takes to listen to them, most people won't invest that amount of time. I mean, I've been doing executive coaching for over 8 years now, and I can just see my clients kind of fog over when I tell them the amount of time they need to spend with their individual employees. I mean, I had one guy I sat in a meeting with, and he tried to tell me that he was a really good manager because he tried to spend at least 15 minutes a month with each one of his direct reports, and he only had 6. And I'm like, that's terrible. What, 15 minutes a month? I mean, you need to be spending 30 to 60 minutes a week with your direct reports in order to build that relationship, in order to really listen. I mean, most conversations, when you think about conversations with your spouse or with a good friend, the real meaty stuff doesn't come in the first 15 minutes. The real meaty stuff comes in minute 38, minute 42. It's like, hey, before we wrap up, or right at the end of a meeting, and you're like, oh my gosh, that was the jewel that we were waiting for 45 minutes. Let's schedule another meeting and now talk about the issue that we finally got to. We're in such a rush. And I think, some of it is, and I know you can't stereotype everybody, that the academic world doesn't teach this stuff for the most part. And then there's books out there that talk about efficient time use and, the 4-hour work week. The 4-hour work week is stupid. I mean, if you're going to be the leader people want to work for and create a place people really want to work, you can't spend that little bit amount of time engaging with your team. My team needs to know that I'm going to be in the office. My team needs to know how to connect with me remotely if they need me. I need to be available for my team. And it's really selfish of me if I'm trying to cram my work week into 4 hours or because I got to get to the golf course or whatever the case is. If that's what you want, don't get into leadership. And so I think it really boils down to, A, we weren't taught that. B, we taught things the wrong way for a long time, but now we know better. And we know that in the world we live in today, people need to have time with their boss. They want to have that interaction to build trust. And if you don't give it to them, I think that's why millennials get a bad, rap in the workplace. People like, oh, they'll leave in the heartbeat. They'll leave for better leadership is what they'll leave for, because they saw their parents, they saw their parents put up with crappy leadership, and it didn't get their parents anywhere because they still got laid off, or they still had, heartburn and whatever because their boss didn't treat them well, and they're just not willing to endure that much pain. And I don't blame them. And they should leave for better leadership. And so, that's what it boils down to, I think, is just leaders tend to be selfish. Patrick Lencioni put out a great book about the motive of why are you a leader? And if you're a leader because you think it's a reward for the past 20 years worth of work you've done, you're probably going to be a crappy leader. If you're a leader because you want to serve people and you want to help people accomplish their goals, people sign up to work with that guy all the time.
Yeah, amen. I think most leaders, again, they have good intentions. Not everyone, though. Some people really are in leadership simply for their ego, for the power. I was in a meeting once with someone. We were describing like the why of your work. Simon Sinek's famous book.
Yep.
Why do you do what you do? And everyone was going around the room and talking about like these inspirational whys that drive them. And then this one person who happened to be, a senior leader in the organization said, I love power. I love exerting power over people. I'm like, well, that was an honest response.
Yeah.
But it's super telling. And it's also interesting that nobody likes to work with that person. And everyone feels like that person's a bully and so forth. So, I think most leaders aren't like that, though. Most leaders want to do right by their people, but it becomes either an issue of the selfishness, like you were saying, but I would even soften it a little bit for the majority of people. I think it's just a matter of priority and prioritizing. And if I don't know any better, if I don't know any different, and I've just seen other leaders behave this way and they run their team this way, what am I going to do when I find myself in that position? I'm going to run my team the same way I've seen it modeled for me over the years. And if I've never learned anything different, or I've never had an opportunity to experience anything different, of course I'm going to perpetuate, and continue the cycle of just bad leadership. Even if you think you're trying to do better. And so there's just so much opportunity for us to just do the basic fundamentals, the simple little things daily on a continual basis. And if we can focus on those things, just mutual accountability and trust with your people, getting to know your people, understanding what drives them, what's their why, how do you connect their passions, their vision, their meaning and purpose with the company's vision and mission and purpose. Just those types of conversations on a regular basis go a really, really long way. And to your point, sometimes that means you're having formal one-on-one meetings with people. Sometimes it's just creating an environment and opportunity where you can have those casual encounters with people. If you have a virtual team or a hybrid team, just making sure that they know you're accessible. Like hop on a Teams meeting, hop on a Zoom meeting, have a chat, call me on the phone, text me, Slack, whatever. There's so many ways to communicate. Just communicate with people more regularly. And I think your point about millennials is spot on. Millennials, and even more so with Gen Z individuals now entering the workforce,
Yeah.
they know better. They know, and I will say, because I'm a university professor, I think we do a much better job now than happened like when I was going through school, and how I was taught in management and leadership programs versus how we do things now. I think our students are coming out of the university with a much higher expectation and understanding of like what good leadership, good management looks like. They're just simply not willing to put up with it. They're not willing to put up with a tyrant boss, a jerk boss. They're not willing to put up with someone who's not willing to invest in them, who's not willing to mentor and coach and support them and help them develop. And I think that's actually a pretty reasonable thing. So if you have a constant churn of millennials and Gen Z workers who just seem to be leaving your organization, you need to ask yourself why. There's a reason they don't want to stay. And research shows that the most common reason is that, their boss creates an environment that's not psychologically safe, and it's not a positive environment for them to be. They don't want to show up, and they'd rather go somewhere else. And sometimes it's about pay, but usually it's not. Usually it's about some of those other intrinsic factors that we've already kind of been referring to.
Yeah, pay usually shows up fourth or seventh on the list, somewhere down in that range. This is why I love conversations like this, because I appreciate you mentioning the point that the current students coming out of university do have a different expectation, because I think that's a fair point, that they are being taught more what good leadership looks like versus, I mean, again, I graduated from college 33, 34 years ago, whatever it is at this point. I promise you, I never had that taught in a class. And so I think that is a great distinction to make, and also a level of the frustration, because these young adults are coming out into the workplace with this expectation of what they were taught, and they're meeting up with people my age who were taught something completely different, and that, well, that's soft. If you get to know your people, don't be a soft leader. That's, we call them soft skills, and that's the hardest part of the job, is the soft skills, if you dive into it. So I think that's an interesting distinction to make generationally. What we were taught, what I think of when I think of what the academic community is putting out is, outdated. Thanks for making me feel old. But I think that's important for me to be aware of as well. So I love the learning that I'm getting out of this conversation as well, that, they're coming out with a different expectation than what I was taught. I mean, I came from the time period when it was, don't get to know the people you work for, because when you have to fire them, it'll just make it that much harder. And it's just like, that's just stupid.
That's a good example of something that really is just stupid. And those types of those cultural myths, I'll call them, these assumptions that persist. We need to dismantle that stuff, and I think slowly but surely we are. And some of it is generational, some of it is just preference and style. And it's true, some people like to be led differently. I don't know many people like this, but I've seen them in the past, that there's some people really do like a more of a command control leadership style. That's not for me. I would never want to be working for someone like that, but I get it. Like, so there context, I guess, is really important. So we need to recognize context. We need to understand who we're working with. Sometimes it's generational, sometimes it's just situational, or just preference, which speaks to the point. Like, you need to know your people. If you know your people, then you can cater to their needs in the way that they like to be led the most. And that hopefully doesn't sound like rocket science to anybody.
No, but it takes a lot of time. I mean,
it takes effort.
I think that individual approach, I mean, I've had individuals that have worked for me in the past that if I gave them a list of things to do today, they would execute flawlessly. If I just leave them at their desk to come up with that list they will sit there all day and not know what to do because they need somebody to give them that list. There's nothing wrong with that. I just need to know either I need to create that list or someone else in my organization needs to create that list for them. And then they're going to be fantastic at executing on that list. And so I need to know them well enough to realize what's the problem here. Hey, they're not getting anything done. Well, they're not just lazy. They just don't know how to create the list. So let's create the list for them and get the benefit of all that work that they'll do to knock that list out. And so that's where I think we get anytime you try to cram everybody through the same system. That's why our public school systems only work for about 70% of the population. That's why our medical system really only works well for about 70% of the population, because there's always that 30% that need that individual care and they don't learn this way, or they don't this or that, this medication doesn't work for them. I mean, I've experienced that in my own life of, well, this medicine always works. Well, it doesn't work for me. What else you got? Well, I don't know. This has always worked. It's like, okay, I need someone that's going to try to figure this out for me. And so we do the same thing in our work environment. If we try to have one policy that works for everybody in the organization, 30% of the organization's not going to feel spoken to or listened to or whatever.
Yeah.
They're going to end up leaving, and that turnover costs you a lot of money.
Yeah, a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of stress and anxiety. I mean, it really just saps the energy out of a good team. And so you want some continuity, and you create that, you develop that just by having a dynamic environment where people actually like to show up to work. In our last little bit of time together, let's talk about perhaps any nuances you see if we're talking about traditional physical workplace environment versus fully remote distributed workforce versus hybrid.
Yeah, wow. There's a 2-hour conversation we could have on that. I think the biggest thing from a leader's standpoint, back to the same, topic, if I'm going to spend the time it takes, I like in person because it's easier to have some of those impromptu meetings. If we're working remote, I've got to schedule a Zoom call with you at a certain time, and it's harder to read you over a Zoom call. If it's in person, I can see your body language better and I can go, something's off here. Let's pull this person in and find out what's going on. Zoom makes that harder in my mind to do that. You can still see it, but you have to be even that much more fine-tuned looking for what's off there today or what's working well or whatever. And so I think the Zoom stuff, leaders just have to know, you've cameras on, I need to see you. I need to be able to read whether you're doing okay or not, and then schedule a separate Zoom call and say, hey, what's going on? It seems like, you're lower energy or something seems off for you. And I've had those conversations with people on my team while we've been working from home during different stages of the pandemic. And I find I probably work an hour and a half to 2 hours more a day trying to keep up with my team on Zoom, whereas I can walk through the office and get a pretty quick read in a way that I can't on Zoom. So that's probably the thing that I see for leaders. That's the hardest part, is to really, if you're trying to engage with your team, it's harder to tell over Zoom. And especially when the tendency I see with a lot of places is cameras off. And now all I'm hearing is your voice, and I'm supposed to tell whether you're doing okay just by your voice. Boy, if I'm not a trained, person in that, I'm going to miss a lot of cues and you're not going to be as good. The other thing that I'll mention real quick is that I've seen with a handful of people that are introverted that have been working from home for a long time. I'm not an expert or whatever. My hunch is, though, I think they're more introverted now since they've been working from home, and it's not necessarily helping them in their own mental well-being. And I believe we're built for community, and whether or not you're introverted or extroverted, you still need people in your life. And so if you're working remote, you've got to be aware of that and make sure that you're engaging with people and not just clicking into a meeting, making a quick decision, and then clicking off and being out. Relationships can still be formed with Zoom and with telephone calls, and they need to, because I think that's how we're at our best as people. Even if you're introverted, you still need people. You just have to have some time away from them to get recharged. I'm introverted, but I spend my whole day with people, and I just need my evenings to get recharged. but we're designed to be around people. And so in office or remote, you've got to make time for that.
Yeah, yeah, we're social animals. Human beings need community. There's no question about that. And most people, when we talk about introverts, extroverts, it's not like a dichotomy, it's a spectrum. And so
Yeah.
people fall somewhere along the spectrum, and some people need a little bit more than others, but ultimately people need people. And so I think it is a challenge in trying to navigate that, and trying to, as a leader, trying to make sure that like the mental well-being, the mental health, the social and intellectual well-being of my people are being met, when they're remote, because over time, that could start to not only impact their performance and the bottom line of the company, and the value your team is offering, but it certainly can hurt the individual. And we want to look out for that and support our people in all aspects of their lives, so that they can be successful. And ultimately, I'm an introvert too. I would say, I definitely fall on that end of the spectrum. But it does depend. Like, it depends on the context I'm in. Like, in some cases, I really enjoy being around people and I don't even feel that drained from it. But in other situations, I do. And I'm inclined, when I'm in a Zoom meeting, especially if there's a lot of people there, like, not only do I have my camera off, but I have it muted, and I only chime in once every blue moon, and otherwise I'm just kind of sitting there listening. And obviously that's not going to provide that social connection that people need. So just be thoughtful about that. I think it's even more challenging when we're talking about some people being in work all the time, some people being distributed and remote all the time, and then having others who are hybrid and kind of mix and match. I think we as leaders are going to have to try to figure that out. We're going to have to try to figure out how to balance the connection piece, the productivity piece, the innovation piece, and support our people effectively, without getting completely overwhelmed by it ourselves. But ultimately, it comes back to those fundamentals you mentioned right at the beginning of our conversation today. It's not rocket science. It's not super complex, but it is difficult because it takes consistent, concerted, sustained effort over time. And anytime you talk about sustained anything, that's hard. And so we just need to start today, make a commitment to ourselves and to our people that we're going to do this. Set up an accountability structure for yourself to make sure that you're doing it, and pretty soon it'll become a habit, and you'll start. I'm convinced, anyone listening, if you're not doing the things we've been talking about, you start doing them and do them, consistently over time. In the next couple of months, you're going to see huge, fast changes and improvements with your team. I'm completely convinced of that, and so it's just a matter of committing to it and prioritizing it so that we're giving the time to it.
Yeah, the thing that I'll kind of wrap up my comment with, and I learned it from Zig Ziglar, who was the Simon Sinek of my day, and he always said, you can have everything you want if you help enough other people get what they want. And that is the bottom line to good leadership. That's what this is all about. If I'm caring about you and helping you get what you want, you're going to work and you're going to help me accomplish what the company needs to accomplish, because you're going to feel engaged, you're going to feel listened to, and you're going to want to do something that's bigger than yourself. And that's how that gets accomplished.
Amen. Well said, Frank. It has been a real pleasure talking with you today. I really appreciate all of your insights. Before we wrap on up, I just want to give you a chance to share with listeners how they can get connected with you and find out more about the work you're doing and how your team can help them.
Yeah, sure. So the easiest place to get a hold of me is on LinkedIn. I put out a video series called Driving Happiness at Work. Usually try to have about a 60-second video that talks about business culture and kind of one thing that you need to be focused on to help be a better leader, better business culture. So always happy to help reach out to people and give them my thoughts on what can help a situation. So if you have any concerns or questions in your workplace, just reach out to me on LinkedIn and say, hey, I've got this situation. What would you do? I'm happy to respond to that kind of a question for people, and love getting to do that. So
wonderful. Thank you, Frank. It has been a pleasure. I encourage listeners to reach out, to get connected, find out more about what Frank and his team can do for you. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week.